All right, let's go to Greg Palcott, who was less than 5 feet away from Oscar Pistorius while all of this played out in the courtroom. Greg, what can you tell us from in there?
Martha, Bill, amazing stuff. Again, I was just a couple feet away from Oscar Pistorius when the word came down that, in fact, he was free on bail. He started to cry uncontrollably behind him. His families yelped out a shout of cheer. They clearly saw this as at least a small victory. The accused was then led off, and then the family continued to cheer and to hug each other. I left them as they were in an embrace, a circle embrace. I spoke to a few of the family and friends, and they said they were happy, they were gratified. But this was a long haul. As I'm sure you've been explaining to our viewers, we were in that hot, sweaty courtroom, and the judge, known to be methodical, certainly took his time, going through piece by piece, through the evidence, through his arguments, through the case, and finally coming to the conclusion that, in fact, bail should be granted to Pistorius, that he did not represent a flight risk, as he called it. He did not represent a risk to other individuals, and it would not impede the case. But in fact, it took a long time to get to that point, and the judge made a lot of other points as well. The key issue about whether or not this shooting, this death of Steenkamp, of Reva Steenkamp, the former girlfriend of Pistorius, that was still left open. In fact, the judge saying that while he was less inclined to think that it was premeditated murder, in fact, it was not his position to decide whether it was. He would keep it in what is called Category 6 here in South African law, and it would be the job of a trial judge to decide whether, in fact, this premeditated murder. But he would proceed along those lines. He did pick apart the case of Detective Botha. That was the lead detective in the case up until about a day and a half ago. Time and time again, he said the evidence gathering was sloppy, but then he came around and said it is not Detective Botha that is the state case. The case is still out there. And then, point by point by point by point, he said he had troubles with the various aspects of the story being put out by the defense for Pistorius, the actions on the night, the early morning hours of Valentine's Day, which left the slain woman in that bathroom. Again, I was very close to Pistorius in the courtroom, again, only just a couple feet away. I kept glancing over to him, and he lost composure again and again and again. His head was down, first downcast, and then literally in his hands when the judge went through the events of that tragic night, when he recounted eyewitnesses and friends of Pistorius talking about the relationship with Steenkamp. He was crying. He was clearly worked up. There was an adjournment in the case, in the hearing, for the judge to leave for a moment, and that helped to compose to some degree the accused. He came back out and heard this decision on the bail. That, by the way, the mechanics of that is this, that should be happening in the next couple of hours. It will be processed here, and we're waiting for the details of exactly when he will be set free. But from a short-range standpoint, family and friends telling me that they are gratified by the decision on bail. On the longer-range standpoint, that is the state of the case against Pistorius, still a lot of questions, a lot of doubts raised by this methodical judge in this lengthy conclusion to this bail hearing. Yeah. Martha, Bill.
It is so striking. And as you say, that judge laid out in very clear terms why he thought that the defense's story does not hold up, why it was implausible, improbable that the way that the defense was describing what happened that night could be true. And yet then he went together and pieced together the problems with Detective Botha's investigation. And it felt that because they could not establish a violent past for Pistorius, a history of this kind of behavior, and because they cannot prove that what happened that night is as it might appear, that prompted this judge to say that gives me no reason not to allow you to be out on bail. Greg, what about the question of what happens now? What kind of restrictions will be on Oscar Pistorius as he waits for his trial? Do they have a speedy trial system in South Africa, or is this something that's going to drag on indefinitely before we see him back in court?
Martha, from legal experts I've been speaking to, this will drag on. They don't see an actual trial in this matter, although it seemed like there's been a trial here for the last couple of days, at least for many, many months, not maybe until the end of this year. And that was probably one of the big arguments for allowing Pistorius to be granted bail. The prisons in South Africa are rough. Conditions in these cells are tough. Crime is high here, and I think that weighed on the judge's mind heavily, that Pistorius in one of these South African prisons for 6, 7, 8 months waiting for the trial to start. Well, that could raise even more problems. Yes, he will be under tight supervision, tight restrictions. We know where he's going to be. He's going to be at a family home. There will be tabs on his movements. But going into this hearing, Martha, I was basically told that it looked like the judge would grant the bail. But once again, for our viewers, we must underscore, and I think the judge underscored this too, this does not in any way really make a decision, make a judgment on the case. That in fact, again, the judge time and time again thought that there were all sorts of problems with the version of events that Pistorius' lawyers laid out. Again, 6, 7, 8, 9 times the judge said he had problems with that. But at the same time, yes, he was pretty fair and pretty balanced on this matter. At the same time, he took apart time and time again the initial work by the state. I think basically now he's saying, Martha, that South Africa has to get down to business and really put some top investigators on this and create a case. And what I've been told by legal experts is the forensic evidence is not in, the autopsy evidence, the ballistic, all of this is still to come. All of this potentially damaging. Martha.
Yeah, so many details. I mean, you think about the angle of the bullets and the way they went into that door, and whether or not that determines if he had his prosthetic legs on at the time or not, and whether that goes to the issue of premeditation perhaps and what was going on. We heard Megan talking about how she was dressed in street clothes when she was in there, which doesn't back up the story of a couple asleep in bed and hearing something go bump in the night in another room and causing them to fear. One more question that I have for you, Greg, is just in terms of the trial, when it does happen, it will be to a trial judge. But just so everyone understands here at home, there won't be a jury in this case to convince.
That's a fascinating point you're raising, Martha. You're absolutely right. There is no tradition, no system of jury trial in this country. It is one judge alone, perhaps with some assistance, but he's the one deciding things. And so it will be all up to one person, and if that person has one inclination or another inclination, who knows, that could weigh in on a trial as well. But you're right, it is not a jury trial. It is the state presenting the case. It is the defense presenting the case. I have to tell you, from sitting in that courtroom for a couple of days, that defense team is top notch, and if they can pick any holes in the state's case, they will look to that. But an interesting point, Martha, which was raised to me, that the fact that the lead detective was bounced from the case, the fact that the detective Bota was disparaged by the defense team, that might come back to haunt the defense team. I am told by one insider, they might have now South Africa's law enforcement agencies completely focused on this. The chance that they will make as many mistakes as we saw in the past couple of days, perhaps lessen, Martha.
Got a couple things crossing here. One is that he has been ordered to avoid his home, to avoid the witnesses in this case, to surrender his passports. The conversion on the bail comes out to about $28,000, which seems rather low considering what he's been accused of here and the means that he has. So this has been an extraordinary morning in this whole case. Greg, thank you very much. I know we're going to want to come back to you.